Hello again, everybody. I'm Joe Pryweller, Conference Director for Plastics News. I want to welcome you to our next Fireside Chat of 2019, part of our ongoing discussion with key industry topics relevant to the plastics industry. These discussions are fueled by M. Holland Company and produced by Plastics News, which also posts each Fireside Chat on its website. We're excited to bring this discussion to you live video and allow you to interact with our presenters. You have the option to submit questions at any time during the chat, and they will be answered in the order received at the tail end of the discussion. Just click on the Q&A icon on the side of your computer screen and then type in your question. We look forward to your participation and some compelling questions. As all of you know, the North American plastics industry is displaying growing attention to environmental issues. Driving the plastics industry's participation in the circular economy is vital to creating a more sustainable world, and for humanity and the industry both. An increasing number of companies within the industry have demonstrated urgency in coming together to proactively create more sustainable products and solutions. Our panelists today will discuss the current state of sustainability in the plastics industry, how to overcome obstacles to create a more sustainable future, and how to face the plastics waste elephant in the market head on. Let me now introduce today's speakers. To my immediate left, in alphabetical order, is Scott Hammer, Corporate Sustainability Leader at Charter NEX Films. Joining Charter NEX in 2015, Scott focuses on spearheading all the company's sustainability initiatives, which include the technical and customer support for the Charter NEX Green Arrow family of films, as well as the zero waste to landfill objective for all 7 of the CNEX manufacturing facilities. To Scott's left is Lindy Holland, Sustainability Program Lead at M. Holland Company. Lindy is a lead for various initiatives and programs, including management of strategic planning with supply partners, sustainability program development, and diversity and inclusion program implementation. And finally, next to Lindy is Sarah Marshall, Director of Sustainability at Nova Chemicals. Sarah is responsible for leading cross-functional efforts to achieve the company's long-term vision for sustainability. She's a strong advocate for plastic circular economy, working with supply chain partners, customers, government officials, industry associations, and others to help create innovative solutions for plastics recycling and recovery. Let's now turn the conversation over to our 3 speakers. As a reminder, to ask a question, open the Q&A icon on the side of your screen and type in your question at any time during the conversation, and we will get to them later in the chat. Let's launch today's chat by discussing the urgency behind the plastics industry's sustainability focus and why it is a top concern of many companies today. We'll start with Scott at Charter NEX Films. Scott, what's behind the company's longtime commitment to sustainability?
Well, first of all, Joe, it's a pleasure to be here, and we appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this panel. At Charter NEX Films, along with several other CPG companies, we acknowledge the fact that plastic waste is a global issue. And as a leading manufacturer of plastic film, we understand the significant role we play with helping our customers achieve their sustainability initiatives and 2025 recycling goals as they committed to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So early on with the plastic sustainability movement, we felt it extremely important to stay on the leading edge of sustainable manufacturing and the production of sustainable films and packaging. And this became a top concern for us for 3 reasons. One, it's simply the right thing to do. It's who Charter NEX is. It is in our DNA, and we are always striving to find a better way to do things. 2, we found it a great opportunity to leverage our innovation, which is a core value at Charter NEX. And with our passion for sustainability and the ability to combine that with the talented technical resources we have and the state-of-the-art equipment that we have created some very viable, sustainable film solutions. And finally, 3rd, we thought we brought a unique and valued perspective to the industry and to our customers. And being a leading producer of these types of films, we thought we were in a good position to show what was possible from a film production standpoint. And from that, we created our Green Arrow family of films for sustainable film initiatives, which many of our customers are utilizing today to meet their sustainability initiatives.
Great. Lindy, at M. Holland, why is sustainability becoming a top concern of the company?
Number one, it's a top concern of our employees. So we are taking that forward as a critical issue for our team members as well as our external stakeholders. It's a critical conversation for both our clients and for our suppliers, and we sit at a nexus point as a distributor in the industry. We serve multiple markets and we serve multiple geographies throughout the world. And as legislation changes and as new solutions develop, we want to make sure that we are staying current and relevant and providing the market with what it's most interested in having.
Terrific. And Sarah, I know you want to talk a little bit about Nova. I know that you have 3 goals that you've been working on at the company, and why is it a top concern at Nova?
Nova's been a responsible care member since the founding of responsible care, and it's the way that chemical and the petrochemical industry looks to take care of our operations, our communities, particularly starting out with safety. But about a decade ago, responsible care incorporated sustainability principles too. And that really helped start our thinking around more of the environmental outcomes we were looking for from our operations and from our products. But fast forward, and over the past couple of years, the issue of plastic waste in the environment, the issue of climate change, they've become major societal focus points. And I'll tell you a little story to make it personal for me, but I'm sure everybody in the company and around the panel has a similar type story. I went 2 years ago into my kids' class to talk about plastics. I was invited in, and the teacher didn't tell me the day before they watched the movie Blue Planet with David Attenborough. Very powerful. And one of my son's little friends, as soon as she saw me, she came up to me and she said, "Do you know what's in the stomach of birds? Plastics."
Oh no.
And she spit that word out as if it were a bad 4-letter word, right? And it was just like a highlight to say, wow, you know, everybody in society right now understands that we have a plastics challenge. It's a global challenge. We know now that it's happening predominantly from countries that aren't managing their waste, and yet we also are affected by that as consumers. And before, we were sending recyclables and dirty recyclables all around the globe. So Canadians were finding their shopping bags showing up in the Philippines. And that made everybody realize, hey, this starts with us too. We have to take action at home. So these global challenges, they galvanized Nova Chemicals to take a new look at our sustainability strategy.
Great.
And we're really focused on a plastic circular economy.
Excellent. Maybe just explain to our audience a bit what circular economy is and very briefly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the concept of a circular economy for me is as simple as the plastics that we produced get used again and again. And those molecules of plastics have value after they're used in their first use. We want to be able to collect them, we want to be able to recycle them and see them go back into packaging or a different application again.
Excellent. Well, looming in the background of some of this too is legislation, both here and in Canada. Is it important to get ahead of this? I guess we're talking in some ways in Canada about extended producer responsibility, and Europe too, that might be coming here. And maybe Sarah, again, very briefly, what does extended producer responsibility mean?
Sure. So people are looking for ways to inject funding into the recycling system. We know that we have supply challenges, we know that we have demand challenges, and there's something broken there in the middle. And in Canada particularly, there's been a focus on raising the conversation across all the provinces to harmonize on extended producer responsibility. And what that means is that the curbside collection, instead of it being funded through your tax base in the municipality, that burden is translated onto the stewards of the packaging product. So could be the retailers, could be the brand owners as an example. And they become responsible for meeting government targets around the environmental outcomes or the recycling outcomes that the jurisdiction is looking for. Canada's been a bit more receptive to EPR systems than in the States, but that conversation is starting as people realize that we can't just be talking about the value of plastics to say no to changes that people and states want to make. We have to find ways to say, yes, what can we fix here? What can we get on board with as an industry? And what are the most effective ways to work with legislators through industry associations, individually, to get more funding into that system?
I know also looming a little bit are some brand owner initiatives, like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has some initiatives underway with brand owners, and I know Lindy and Scott were talking about it a little bit. Lindy, maybe you can describe a little bit what the MacArthur Foundation is doing in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation started in 2010. They created a new plastics economy global commitment signed on by many retailers along with brand owners in the conversation who are making sweeping pledges about making their products more recyclable, incorporating more recycled content, as well as compostability, understanding how their products fit into single-use versus reuse models, and understanding what happens to those products after their intended use.
Yeah, and there's quite a few signatories of that too, about brand owners, retailers, some processors also are involved with this also, and a lot of urgency coming along with that, right?
Absolutely.
That you guys are seeing to it at Charter NEX, I
Absolutely.
imagine. Some of this, let's talk about some of the solutions, some of what's been talked about anyway. The industry is doing as far as recycling, as far as waste reduction goes. I know there's a big emphasis right now on chemical recycling and where that industry is headed. Scott, do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Well, I would talk more on the mechanical recycling.
Oh, mechanical. I meant to be mechanical.
No
Chemical
problem.
we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Yeah, and how far that's come.
Right.
And I'm going to date myself here a little bit. Back in the late 80s, I ran initial trials of high-density PCR, and at that point, it was not where it is today. I commend the group that has created those type of resins. They've come a long way to the point now where we have a letter of no objection, and we can put PCR back into food packaging film. I'm a big proponent of the How to Recycle label. That's something that obviously wasn't around when I was young. I would have used it religiously. I use it religiously today. I can't have any passengers in my car because I constantly have big bags of store drop-off materials in my back seat. But there are some inconveniences that the How to Recycle logo does bring to some consumers. They have to go somewhere to drop it off. And secondly, clean and dry. I'm most excited about the material recovery for the future.
What is that?
That is a opportunity where there is a MRF in Birdsboro, Pennsylvania, J.P. Mascaro and Sons, they've incorporated some new optical sensors to be able to create bales of flexible packaging.
Okay.
So this is kind of going against what everybody wants to do. Is now they had to retrain the consumer base there, their customers, to put flexible packaging into the curbside recycling, so they can then pull it out, create a bale, and what we're excited about is, one, it checks the box of consumers can put it curbside, it's convenient. Two, there's no cleaning and washing. And from our perspective, we're looking forward to running some resin very soon made from a bale of flexible packaging to see how it processes on the blown film lights.
Excellent, excellent.
Historically, flexible packaging was not able to be recycled physically through machinery. So I think that's part of the story and why this is such an exciting advance.
Absolutely.
Especially as people are investing further in flexible packaging due to its lightweight nature, easy ability to ship, and also to process.
Excellent. I know in Canada there's work with that done too. We talked about EPR, extended producer responsibility already. Is there more need for funding from some of these programs?
Oh yeah, absolutely, Joe. I mean, there's a tremendous opportunity to put already developed innovation into the MRFs across North America, the municipal recycling facilities. And so, we're seeing funding partners gathering to try to pull funds together, like Circulate Capital, for investment across North America. As an example of an alternative way to get funding into recycling facilities. And I think we'll also see more and more partnerships develop. I mean, one of the biggest opportunities, and you could say it really is innovation, even though it's not technical innovation, is getting the parties talking, right?
Right on.
100%.
Exactly. Collaboration is key, right?
Collaboration is so key
In
here.
all caps.
You know,
Yes.
when you're a resin producer and you've grown up in an environment of producing virgin resin, and you go in and you work with somebody in a MRF, and you see the type of operation and the challenges that they have, it really is a mind-blowing difference, and we need to get more of that connection going across the value chain. Really, you know, taking it from the chain where it ends and connecting it back around.
Definitely.
I
Yeah.
agree. I think there's a lack of education across the board from the consumer and beyond. When I grew up, the basis was reduce, reuse, recycle. Well, understanding
R's.
the capabilities of recycling
Yes.
and understanding what food contact does to packaging is critical in the conversation.
Yes, it starts with education with consumers, goes all the way through the chain to the end user and beyond, I guess, anyway, to other stakeholders with this. But funding being critical with this. Let's move a little bit to chemical, which I meant to leave till now anyway. Why is that a promising development in some ways? Maybe explain a little bit what that is, how it differs from mechanical. Lindy, did you want to start with that?
Sure. I think that advanced recycling technologies are a really promising really promising platform. I think it's in nascent form, and I think we're going to have to address continued collections. We're going to have to understand what the feed streams look like to fund that type of facility. But what I love about it is that it truly closes the circular loop in that you're taking post-consumer waste that otherwise would end up landfilled or diverted, and you're able to break it down to base monomers and oils, and you're able to reincorporate those that feed stream to create virgin plastics again.
Yes, it brings it all the way back around. I know, Sarah, you talked about some 2040 goals that you were looking at as far as this goes.
Yeah, you know, in both the US and Canada, the industry associations have set targets that by 2040, 100% of plastic packaging is being recycled and recovered. And so naturally that means, well, zero is going into the landfill. How are we going to get there, right? So mechanical recycling has made great advancements, but it's probably not going to take us all the way. In fact, you could argue if it gets us halfway, that would be great. These new innovative technologies are absolutely necessary to continue to find ways to make high quality recycled content. So like Lindy mentioned, I mean, technology to get us back to monomers, which are the building blocks of polymers, that is, you know, what we'd call the holy grail of advanced
100%.
recycling technologies. And there's promise there today in the styrene area. Agilix is a company that's able to turn polystyrene recycled content into styrene monomer again. Pyrowave is another company that's doing that, and they're partnering with people in the polystyrene value chain to bring that styrene back into production.
Excellent. How far along is some of that technology? Is it?
It's at demonstration
trial
scale
stage already?
today.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's happening today. Now across all plastics, there's still a lot of innovation to go. In polyolefins, polypropylene, polyethylene, it's a difficult technology,
Right.
not just technically. We've got economic challenges we need to continue to close in on. We need people to be taking the risks to partner, to invest, to scale, and really to move that forward. And I mean, I'm an avid reader of plastics news, and all the time we see new partnerships being announced. So the industry is really working at how we can advance that technology to not let perfection be the enemy of progress, and really advance towards that state.
I think Sarah touched on an important point here, in that there is no magic silver bullet in this conversation. It's going to require all technologies and all hands participating in this conversation to reach progress and to reach success in eliminating
absolutely.
plastic waste from the environment.
Agreed.
Certainly, and they ever talk about the circular economy, bringing plastics back to that takes partnerships, it takes technologies, it takes a lot, it sounds like, anyway, to get us there as it is. Are there some examples of products or things you're seeing on the market now that are doing a good job of of bringing products back and providing a circular loop, I guess, with it. Scott, I know you talked about something when we were discussing with Annie's, right?
Yeah, this is one that I was personally involved in, and I think it's a great demonstration of bringing material back from curbside recycling and putting into a food packaging application. General Mills and their brand Annie's cereals did a very comprehensive scale up and test of incorporating PCR into their cereal bag, and it was 3-phase tests, different lot numbers of resin, different lots of resin, allowed us to produce different lots of the production line, and then we ran it at the co-packer, and all the way through there was really no negatives that were seen, and so it's doable. It can be done, and Charter NEX stands ready to do this for other brand owners. But what I liked most about the Annie's cereal application was how they promoted what a consumer needs to do on the whole back panel of the package from a recycling standpoint. I thought it was a well thought out project that really, I think, hit the mark as far as showing what circular economy could be about.
The communications is as important as the technologies in some cases, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So
the real estate on packaging is critical to the conversation.
Right.
And to give up that much.
To give up that much and label appropriately so that those who don't live in plastics or paper or whatever industry you choose to talk about understand what to do. You can have multiple materials and you can have multiple parts included in a specific package or product. And educating the consumer is critical in the conversation.
For sure. They have to know what you're doing and be part of it to be all in, so to speak, if they know what's going on.
Right.
There's some other areas too that we talk about reducing plastics waste out there now. We talked about some of the technologies to reduce waste in the future, but sort of the cleanup what's happening now. There's something called Alliance to End Plastics Waste is out there now. And Sarah, do you want to explain a little bit what that is?
Yeah, sure. The Alliance to End Plastic Waste started this year, 2019. And it is a CEO-led organization from all across our value chain. So the leader of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste on the board is the CEO of Procter & Gamble, as an example. And its mission is really simple: end plastic waste in the environment. That's what the organization is pulling together to achieve. It's focusing on highest plastic waste leakage geographies. So we know that a lot of waste is mismanaged. For example, in the top 5 countries are in Asia, and it's carried through from on-land waste into the river system and into the oceans. So there's tremendous opportunity to look at the education of the citizens and the nations there, building infrastructure, bringing new innovation into that infrastructure build out, so we don't have to start with what's been working in North America, big landfills. That's a different scenario,
right.
And we've got to innovate from there, and then using that as the cleanup source. So when we get our waste management handled better on land, it will stop that what is estimated to be 8 million tons per year of plastic leaking into the oceans.
That's terrific. Yeah, that's gained a lot of steam. And it's fairly new, but gained a lot of steam already in the industry.
Absolutely. We started with 23 founding members, and Nova was one of those members. There are definitely over 40, the last I heard. And the wonderful thing is, if you take a look at the website, there's some really good projects that are started up already. And so you can see the progress on the Ganges River in India. There's a project called Renew Oceans. And it is wonderful to see the entrepreneurship, the innovation, the caring spirit of the organizations that the Alliance is partnering with, and the projects that they're promoting.
Great.
So just to finish up on it, probably the important thing for this group to understand is it's a significant fund. So the plan is to raise $1.5 billion of funding to put directly into these projects, and that's not enough to handle global plastic waste.
1.5 billion isn't enough. Huh?
Even 1.5 billion, but it's enough to get projects started, to show what can be done, to make them sustainable in their community. They have to be economically sustainable in their community so they can be then carried on in the community, and those alliance dollars can be reinvested into new projects.
Great.
And that you can replicate these projects elsewhere.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. On smaller levels too, that could be done in communities, I guess, too, with this. There's other work underway too. I know Scott's worked with APR a little bit, and
Yeah, I'd like to give a little shout out to them.
Please.
We became members of the Association of Plastic Recyclers recently, and they are really the voice of the recyclers. And they've done a very good job when it comes to the handling of rigid and recycling there. And they're now getting into the world of flexible packaging, and that's really why we joined. Is we want to help guide, assist, whatever we can do, so we can make flexible packaging more recyclable. So they've got plenty of projects going on there. But what I really like about APR is their Demand Champion program, which is creating demand for PCR containing materials, whether it be WIP, whether it be packaging. And we're excited to become an APR demand champion as well. And we need to create that demand. We need to create that pull for recycled materials. And by some of the things that they're doing here and some of the companies that have gotten involved, I'm very excited about that.
great.
We need more PCR material out there because it can be put into film.
Yeah, that's a big change what we talked about previously. You mentioned that before too, Lindy, with what we're seeing out there with some ways. You talk a little bit about open waste too, that you're working with a little bit.
Yeah, we enrolled in Operation Clean Sweep this
good.
year, and we encourage all members, anybody who touches plastic, pellets, flake, powder, to participate in this program. It's really designed to create best practice management for anybody who touches plastic through the entire value chain. And there are ways and there are measurements and there are things that you can do so that you understand that you and your partners are managing your products appropriately.
Excellent. A lot of things going on in the community. I know Project Stop is one that Nova was involved in too, right? The community endeavor.
That's right. Project STOP stands for Stopping the Tap on Ocean Plastics. And Nova invested in that project early last year with the intent that we go into a city in Indonesia as a starting city, study the whole system in that city, the culture, the people, the waste management infrastructure, in this case, lack of, and really work to figure out the whole system that is necessary to make a sustainable waste management system work. So in the city that's been chosen to start with, in Munchar, Indonesia, they now have composting, they have recycling, they have waste management, they have collection in a portion of the city. They've created over 60 jobs in the community, and they've found markets for their recyclables. So far, the project is going well in that community. And actually, the Alliance to End Plastic Waste has now partnered with Project Stop to fund a second city. So we're now in discussions about not just 2, but 3 cities that Project Stop can expand to. And each of them is an archetype for a different kind of community. So, like you said, Lindy, you can see how that works. Where else can you scale that solution? And by trying different cities with different needs, you end up with a scalable model.
And you learn as you go.
And you learn as you go.
And you learn what works and what doesn't work, but the fact that you're trying and the fact that you're investing in something new, I think, is what's most critical and exciting about this opportunity.
Yeah, that's it. It's trying it out and seeing what works and what might be the most effective solution in the future.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit at this point about barriers and challenges that are being faced out there. We've talked about a lot of great activities and great technologies that are underway, but we're still battling the consumer perception that plastics is bad for the environment. What do we do about that? Scott, do you want to start with that?
Sure. We've got to do a better job, I think, of celebrating and advertising some of the successes from a recycling standpoint. I mean, we've touched on some of the important features that plastics packaging does give a consumer, which is, food safety, medical packaging that is safe and sterile, and then also consumer convenience. But some of the things that are hindering the process of, getting that plastic back is just the general infrastructure of the recycling streams, the sorting at the MRFs, and Sarah had touched on this. I tip my hat to those folks that are sorting on the line, because a lot of it is manual and it is tough to do, and they do a fantastic job to try to minimize the contamination. But then also we have to do a better job of trying to recycle other resins or other difficult to recycle materials. And then obviously there's the consumer education piece. I mean, that none of the infrastructure would be possible if we didn't have the consumer education and what consumers needed to do with it. And I believe if they knew what to do with the materials, it would make for more collection. It would probably make for cleaner streams, and then that would turn into hopefully optimized PCR streams of material to be put back into films.
That's great. You talked a lot about consumer education being important, right?
Absolutely. One thing I want to touch on is that the durability of plastic, I think, is a double-edged sword. It is an unbelievable material, and you can use it over and over again, a number of uses to get more and more out of it, out of those already generated molecules to the point of a circular economy. But one of the worst parts about it is if it doesn't end up in the right place, then it can live in the environment for longer. So I think, to Scott's point, collections, infrastructure, sorting, and I will add on top of that, creating next generation markets, high value markets for recycled content, which will continue to help fund that industry.
Interesting.
And fund that space. So
Do you have
that,
some examples in mind for that, for next generation markets?
Well, it can't all go into composite decking. I think it's going to require a lot of innovation, and I think it's going to require a lot of technical know-how to create those spaces, but nothing is beyond imagination.
No, everything's on the table, I guess, right, with this?
And really the composite decking is a great place for it right now.
Yes,
certainly.
It really is.
Certainly. That's been a success story.
It is. It definitely isn't. But we do need to keep looking for those different outlets, and that's part of what we do, and trying to get our customers and the brand owners to kind of make that commitment and jump into incorporating some of this material into their current products.
Certainly.
We've been looking at a couple of studies just to see how much recycled content is going into packaging. And we looked at it in November, and it was astounding how little new product launches came out with recycled content labeled on the package. So with all of the goals that the brand owners have set and the retailers have set, with all of the activity going on, I feel like 2020 is going to be a big year.
Breakout year.
I think
100%.
I think we'll see more innovations coming from inside the shop where people are more comfortable in talking about them. Because I'm totally with both of you. Consumers in North America want to see the recycling rates go up.
Yes.
And everybody in the world wants to see plastic in the environment go down.
Right.
Those two things are what's going to return the conversation to the value of plastics versus the alternatives.
Right.
But until we get recycling rates up and environmental plastic down, I don't know how well we'll be able to sway North American consumers otherwise.
Yeah, well, we have their attention right now. Because more so than in the past, that they're aware of this and want to see something done, but it's a matter of just advancing some of the technologies and some of the work being done here to get to that point, and see where we end up.
Yeah.
And that brings us to another point too. I know that in the past, there's always concern that that virgin resin is priced lower than recycled resin, and maybe products might be a little more expensive because of that. Has there been a shift now where consumers are willing to pay more for a product that uses recycled material in it?
Studies suggest that the newest consumers are interested in paying more for a sustainability story. This is a group that cares, but it's simple economics of supply and demand. When we're talking about quantity and quality of recycled streams, in addition to new spaces in bioplastics, understanding what it's going to take to fund those spaces, to grow them in size, is a different conversation from traditional plastic materials.
Certainly. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a vast amount of polling that's showing there's some consumers that are willing to pay more. How much more, the brands will know better than I do. But certainly we are definitely asked to innovate, not only on incorporation of recycled content, but on performance, right? Brands don't want to give up on anything to do with performance. Right. So aesthetic, barrier and shelf life, those things are still critical.
For sure.
So that has to happen. And then cost. Because in other substrates, paper, aluminum, recycled content doesn't mean price hikes.
Right.
So it will be very interesting to see how this moves forward, but at our state today, with how much is really being recycled in North America, in around 10%.
Right.
We have a lot of work to do to be able to drive the solutions up and the economics down.
For sure. Are there incentives to invest in sustainable material, or is that necessary in any case?
Well, I think it's important for the brand to start looking at doing that because of the commitments that they've made, as well as being able to make that claim and show that they are listening to the consumer and trying to incorporate whatever they can from a sustainability standpoint.
Yes,
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important for the brand to do that.
Yeah, and you see more sustainable materials on the table. I think, but now it seems like it's growing in number, and people are trying things. Mentioned trying things certain ways, but there's a lot of activity which is encouraging, I imagine, anyway.
Yes,
it's out there.
Absolutely.
Which leads to a point too. Is this? I guess the question is why now? Why has this become such a big business imperative at the moment that solutions be found to this compared to the past? Sarah, do you want to start that, or Scott?
In all the conversations that we've been having at Nova Chemicals and I've been involved into with our customers, there's only about 3 topics that are top of mind, and sustainability is always one.
Right.
Always
Every
one.
time.
So what we're seeing is that, this is table stakes now. Companies need to have a position on sustainability. We need to be taking actions. And if companies aren't yet actively involved in this, maybe waiting to see what other part of the value chain is going to crack this nut first, I would argue that it's time to get in. I mean, it's an absolutely strong call.
Right.
We've never heard demand signals like we have from the Ellen MacArthur signatories on recycled content.
Yeah. I see it as a make or break for the industry really at this time, and we've got to step up, we've got to do it. Otherwise, we won't be that valued partner for our consumers and the downstream stakeholders. And, we're going to continue to keep challenging our suppliers, ourselves from a manufacturing standpoint to keep developing new, unique films that are going to meet the requirements of our customers to meet these sustainability initiatives.
Oh, certainly.
It's not a nice to have, it's a need to have in the business landscape today. It is imperative that we participate at all areas of the value chain. There is nobody immune to this conversation.
No,
right.
No.
At all. And when we talk about
no one's
things
left
like what's important to the upcoming workforce generation, sustainability is critical in that conversation.
Yeah, that's a good place to go maybe to end the conversation, this part of the chat, is how do we attract workers to the industry with the perceptions that are out there? Is that imperative to change the outlook for talent anyway coming into the marketplace?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It's an uphill battle today. Less people have been interested in joining manufacturing in general, and the perception of plastics has helped guide that narrative. And I think when we're talking about talent attraction and recruitment, plastics tells a really good story.
Yeah.
We're a well-funded industry. We participate in leading technologies like 3D printing, robotics, artificial intelligence, all areas that gain a lot of buzz, and industrial engineering, lots of different spaces. So if we can get past the hurdle of the perception of plastic, I think that will continue to sustain all of our businesses going forward.
Absolutely.
I agree. I mean, it's there's myself and a couple of colleagues were asked to be guest speakers at a college class last week, and really the question came down to why would someone want to get into the plastics industry when it's been taking such big hits in the media and social media especially, and really they are right now in an age where they are seeing sustainable packaging become more prevalent. and they are not going to want to see that criteria back off at all. So it's an opportunity for these new grads or these students that are going to get internships. And I'll tell you, if they're doing an internship or they get into their new job, they will have some type of sustainability project right out of the gate. And so it's an opportunity for these new emerging leaders, if you will, to come in with their knowledge, their creativity, their passion for the environment and sustainability, to come into a plastics company and truly make a difference and an impact.
Excellent.
And those are the type of folks we'd be looking for.
Yeah, well, that's for the future. There's need for talent, for sure, for labor. There's lots and lots of questions, needless to say, so let's get to those. We'll get them in the order that they are received. If you want to ask them still, if you go in the section of your chat on the side of your computer screen, type in your question. We'll hopefully get to as many as we can here in the time we have left. One question, this might be for Scott, it involves mechanical recycling. Is it true that polymers can normally be mechanically recycled 1 to 2 times before the polymer chains have become too short to be recycled without mixing in virgin plastics? And how does that affect the sustainability issue and circularity?
Well, I'm not sure how many times it can be recycled. I'll leave that to my polymer colleagues here, but we have not, from a consistency standpoint of material that we've been getting, we have not seen a drop-off in quality. When we put material back in, like edge trim and things like that, we have not seen a drop-off in material.
Okay, so that's really not the case.
But I guess that remains to be seen. I really don't know how many times it could be reused.
I think. Oh, please go ahead.
Well, the thing I was going to add is it really depends how it's being incorporated too. So Nova Chemicals has introduced some new resins that are able to more easily accept being blended with recycled content.
Okay.
So it's all about how you protect those polymer molecules, whether it's through extrusion and blending, and there's a lot of innovation we can do there. I know there was a limited study on high-density polyethylene done that showed it could be recycled up to 10 times. So it seems like quite a bit. When we talk about paper, usually about 7 times before the fiber length gets too small.
Right.
I think there's room for innovation on understanding it and then making it better.
Great.
Agreed.
Well, could get some good questions here. The question was, how are we going to work to get the required infrastructure in place to that 100% recyclable materials are actually collected and transformed? In other words, is there enough recycled plastic to go around for all these commitments that are taking place, and how do you get the infrastructure in place to gain more of that? We talked some about that already, I think, but is that a big issue right now? Is getting enough recycled plastics to meet some of these needs?
Yes,
absolutely.
We are short on supply, also in quality of the recycled content needed to meet brand pledges ahead of 2025, when much of this is going to be implemented and executed into the market. You read an interesting study recently about how short supply is in recycled content.
Well, just the Ellen MacArthur Foundation spring report indicated that if all the recycled content targets were met, it was something like 10 times more recycled content necessary than there is today. So there's a strong demand pull, and for the recycled content that's most commonly used, polyester and high-density polyethylene, absolutely. There's lots of opportunity for those that are making those products in the market.
Question here, should we be talking about industrial, not just post-consumer recycling, but post-industrial recycling too in this conversation? Is that just as important? Or basic in the plants?
I think it's just simply good manufacturing process. I mean, practices that if, whatever waste you produce, if you can, repelletize it and put it back into certain applications and not send it out for, to landfill or anything like that. I think you need to be able to do that. But I think more people are more interested in what we can do from a post-consumer recycled standpoint. So I think PIR is generally understood as something that I think companies need to do and must do to control their waste.
Anything that drives value and anything that you can do to keep already generated molecules in the system is important. Sure. Whether it's post-consumer or post-industrial, I think it's important to note that we don't want to waste. Waste is not waste until it's wasted. So how do we continue to drive all solutions, post-consumer, post-industrial, and anything else in between?
Yeah, there is a lot of institutional, commercial, and industrial type material out there. And I would just argue that it's all PCR.
Right.
It's all been used, it's been sold, it's gone into commerce, and it needs to come back
Good point,
to
yeah.
Lindy's point.
And we can do more with it.
Yeah, with that too. So it's all part of the same conversation. There's really not a demarcation between the two. In other words, with some of that. Sarah, do you think the global plastics industry will eventually completely shift to producing and using only recycled plastics and plastics that come from renewable sources? The question is direct to you. All of you can answer that.
Yeah, it's so hard to look into the future and predict what will happen. But what I can say is Nova Chemicals is not the only company focused on a plastic circular economy and solutions to using plastics that would otherwise be landfilled. So I do think we will see significant innovation leaps in advanced recycling technologies from across the resin producer spectrum. There are brands that have been engaged in this area. There's new tech startups. The oil and gas companies are also very interested in understanding the opportunity for municipal solid waste and mixed plastic streams as feedstock for fuel products and chemicals. So there's a lot of innovation in this space, and it will start to transform plastic feedstocks.
Great. Any other comments?
I think she absolutely covered it.
Excellent. Who will fund the MRFs of the future, optical sorters across North America to improve material recovery? Is there a need to fund those? Is that where a big cost comes from as far as infrastructure goes?
I think there will be. I mean, that's especially if this material recovery for the future really shows some promise. I think what we need to do is try to find ways to move that to other MRFs within the state of Pennsylvania and across the country. And it's something I think that we definitely need to support.
The technology is not tremendously expensive.
No.
Really in the
That's
scope
good
of our
news.
value chain.
Yes.
But when you look at where are you going to place the burden for funding that? Is it on a municipal recycling facility that's lost a lot of market because of China Sword in the last 2 years? That's going to be expensive from their perspective. So involving the value chain and these entities like Circulate Capital and Closed Loop Partners that are providing opportunities for funding, there's tremendous economic innovation and finance innovation that we also need to take a look at to get funding to the right places to either support supply or pull through demand.
Correct. Yep.
Excellent. The idea of a circular economy is heavily reliant on the consumer recycling. What approach is your company taking to encourage your customers to recycle? Anybody want to start with that?
Well,
That's a tough one.
Yeah, these are challenging questions, I know.
I think across the board, everybody is looking at their business plans to see where they can participate further, but we're all just one link on the chain, and we need to understand what it's going to take to get to that last step once it reaches the consumer's hands and inspire ease and inspire education and I think inspire acknowledgement of what happens. I think the more visible we can get once solutions are in place and once products do make it to the correct stream, then I think that it will bring the consumer on board, but it's got to be easy and it's got to be available across the board.
It's a really good point. It can't be difficult. Can't be too many sorters. They have to be able to do it easily in their homes.
And I'd build on that. Educating consumers has got to be one of the collective efforts that we take on as
Right.
a whole value network. You know,
it's probably the one most overlooked.
From a young
Consumer
age,
education.
It is, and yet it's so necessary and it's possible. I would argue it's possible. So if you look at organizations like Keep America Beautiful, I think we were talking about this earlier when we talked about someone watching Mad Men set in the 1950s, and after a picnic they just left all of their litter in the park. Well, organizations like Keep America Beautiful did major anti-littering campaigns, and today, yes, there's still some litter, but it's dramatically improved from that behavior of the past. So there are organizations that we can work with to get the funding into education.
Interesting. Here's a question. Please comment on the predominance of polypropylene packaging like yogurt cups and the lack of a recycling demand for this material. Are areas, we talk about flexibles and being with that as things like polypropylene containers for food. Is there technologies there too that could work with that?
I think there are technologies that can work with it, but again, what we need to recognize is the impact that food contact and other organics make on any packaging container, and what impact that makes at a recycling infrastructure. Right. Understanding what that sorting, what that cleaning looks like. If somebody wants to know how they can make a direct impact quickly, wash out your food containers before putting them in a recycle bin.
Yeah,
that's the biggest impact that somebody can make.
Yeah, there's only a certain percentage I know of the recycling material they throw in our recycling bins at home that can't be used anyway because of food contamination. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, these maybe a little better infrastructure, better technologies help with that.
And better education.
And better
to
education.
Go with.
That's important.
It comes
That's
back
critical.
to the same place each time as education.
Absolutely. Do we need to distinguish between advanced recycling technologies that produce outputs that feed into fuel value chains versus product or plastic value chains? Really look, are they one and the same, or are the technologies we look at differently? I guess anyway.
I can talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Definitions for all of these advanced recycling technologies are in play. And depending on your view around definitions that circular economy should only be considered material to material recycling, or can be broader, that you're, again, changing that waste product that would otherwise go to landfill into something of new value, like a fuel, is still very much in debate. Our industry associations are working hard to clarify definitions for officials, and yet we also have to look at it from a consumer standpoint and say, well, at the end of the day, plastics need to be recycled. So how they are recycled, how important is that versus the fact that we're reducing plastic to the environment and reducing plastic to landfills?
Here's a question here. How do we go about combating the paper and glass industries and compared to plastics and some of the perceptions and all that? What steps is the industry taking to educate the community, or is it really just come down to marketing with some of that, with paper, glass, and plastics?
I've seen certain paper companies take pretty big hits at the plastics industry because it's a marketing opportunity. I would say that as a plastics industry, we can't afford to get sucked into arguments with other materials.
Yes.
We need to be focused on what the root of the issue is with our consumer population, with our brands, and address those issues head on. That's where our energy should go. And by doing that, then we get back to the conversation of all the value that plastic brings. So, that's my 2 cents on it. I don't think we can afford to point fingers at paper and glass, even though there are realistic challenges there too, because that just comes right back at us.
It's packaging waste.
We need to
deal
focus
with.
on solutions.
Yep. Question here about the Alliance to End Plastics Waste. A couple people have commented on this. They're wondering why the Alliance is focusing on developing countries first, and North America has been shipping its waste to those countries. Should they be focusing on the developing world as opposed to what's happening here, or is that really the case with what the Alliance is doing?
The Alliance is in its first year of startup,
right.
And its mission is ending plastic waste in the environment. So when I think about that, the organization is focused on impact, right? You go to where the problem is the largest, and you start looking at the solutions that can be scaled from there. Certainly, just because a company is invested in the Alliance to End Plastic Waste doesn't mean that they're not having additional efforts in North America
right.
as well. So it's one of many opportunities for companies to engage. It's an impactful one, dealing with some of the most necessary waste management infrastructure construction and implementation in the world. But those companies that are involved in the alliance are, I would hazard a guess, doing more than only that one initiative.
But I have to mention too, this is a global initiative too, with a lot of global companies involved, and it's not just U.S. based, right? The alliance.
You're right, Joe, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah.
Question here about color is with PCR use. Is there any research into figure out how to mask the gray, green, brown color in plastics, or make it easier to recycle or sell or use that way in sustainability?
I think those are some things that need to continually be worked on. I mean, technology is going to continue to develop in that PCR world. I mean, it's come so far since the late 80s that I'm sure there will be some additives or other things that will come aboard, excuse me, that will help mask that, or, you know, and right now a lot of the PCR that we use, there's very good color consistency. I mean, they do check for color when the material is produced before it is sent to us. So there has been work done in that area to control color.
Good. Again, with everything, there's work to be done. There's a journey taking place that's going to continue with some of this. Lindy, one of our participants here is wondering about flexible packaging. I know you talked a little bit about that before, about more being done in that way, but how is the recycling industry addressing flexible packaging that has multiple layers of different polymers in addition to inks and adhesives?
So I think that it's an interesting conversation because when it comes to flexible packaging, oftentimes these are very complicated chemical structures. But as Scott pointed to the effort of materials recovery for future, I think that's a tremendous opportunity for us all to evaluate advances in flexible film and flexible packaging recycling.
Great. Well, at this point, we have a couple minutes left, and I'm going to have each of you give some last parting comments on any messages you want to leave behind for the audience here about sustainability and recycling, anything you think is an important takeaway that those listening to the chat today should take from this. We'll start, Scott, start with you.
Well, from my perspective, it's collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. And when we talk about what we can do better from a recycling infrastructure, I think we need to break down the barriers and everybody kind of protecting their turf, as there really is only one turf we're trying to protect, and that's good old Mother Earth here. So, I mean, we need to get everybody, not just from the brand owners to the converters and, you know, to the resin manufacturers, but we got to include the recyclers, we got to include the municipalities, we got to include the consumer in all of this in order to create a successful recycling process, if you will, because I'm not going to call it a program ends. Process is going to be continuing, and we need to continue to challenge each other in those areas to come up with the new way to make this happen.
Lindy?
Sustainability is a team sport. There's no other way about it. We have to, number one, take ownership of all of our positions in this conversation. We need to understand what we can manage and where we can invest our time, energy, and money going forward. And we need to listen. We need to take a step back and we need to listen to the consumer. As Sarah was talking about earlier, you know, talking about the glass industry or the paper industry, this is our industry and we need to take ownership within that. Nobody is immune to the conversation, and really start to invest our time forward in building solutions.
Great. Sarah?
Yeah. You know, I would say engage and inspire your workforce, because the ideas are likely already there in everybody's company, and people need to be unlocked in their talents to look around the organization, look at the customers they're working for, look at the communities they live in, and as much as it seems like this big, complex issue to collaborate with everybody out there, there's also very individual actions that can be taken by people that inspire and that create that can-do attitude that companies can say, hey, I can do this, I can get started, and there's a place for my company of my strengths and my resources in this conversation and in the innovation.
Great. Start small to build big, in other words. And the other takeaway, as you said, is it's a journey. There's things that are being tried. There's work underway in many different materials, many different types of products, and that will continue. And as it is, these discussions become even more critical over the next course of several years or longer anyway, to talk about sustainability, where we're at in the conversation. With that, I want to thank our great panelists today, Scott Hammer from Charter NEX Film, Lindy Holland of M. Holland Company, and Sarah Marshall of Nova Chemicals. Terrific conversation, and something that will continue to be talked about as we get back to our companies or in your companies too when you're listening to this conversation today. We also appreciate your attendance for this Fireside Chat, fueled by M. Holland Company and produced by Plastics News. If you want to revisit the chat, the entire event will be archived on the live stream section of the plasticsnews.com website, and also the webinar section of the website, which is part of that. Again, this chat and others in this continuing series can be found on Plastics News website, not just this, but other Fireside Chats that we've done. Thank you for joining us today, and we're grateful for your support of our series of Fireside Chats throughout the year. And again in 2020, look for the next in our series of Fireside Chats coming up. Thank you and have a great day.